On a slick Oregon Highway 30, descending to sea level, my Toyota Matrix splashes westward. Through second growth forest of hemlock, Douglas fir, and red cedar along the Columbia River's south shore. All is washed in primordial rain. And where the river finally meets the Pacific, the dauntless Astoria Bridge permits us to cross Columbia's wide Blue Yawn. This is about worlds. Two worlds superimposed. And a land that is not even land, really, but a sketchy finger-like sandbar off the southwest tip of Washington state. The Long Beach Peninsula will for sure one day dissolve back into the ocean. But for this geological moment, here we are. Which is where they were for thousands and thousands of years before. In the time before our timekeeping. The Chinookan people lived richly in radiant mythic reverence of the natural bounty that sustained them. They never needed to plant a seed. Forest and sea brimmed with abundance, and had since the 4th millennium BC, 6,000 years ago. This culture of reverence is not the culture I was born into. Not even close. Whatever vortex we are in, it seems to be spinning in a very different kind of direction. Marsh's Free Museum is a place that perfectly tells the story of 20th century America, better than any real museum ever could. Wellington Marsh opened the business 100 years ago, and his family has kept it open ever since. Marsh sold souvenirs, seashells, and candy. But most importantly, he collected things. A poetry emerges. One wonders if these things don't hold the clue to some great mystery. But what most people come here to see is Jake, the alligator man. He's possibly the most widely recognized resident of the peninsula, a kind of cult mascot of the region. And the abundance of merchandise bearing his likeness will outlast any artifact here of flesh, bone, or wood. He is a kind of homage to this murky, wet land. The forest is the inner sanctum of human culture in this part of the world. A darkly dripping place of undulations and breeding. It's no wonder there is relatively little in the way of artifacts left from the ancients, who built everything with wood, long since rotted away. Their cedar longhouses were the center of ceremony, wherein spirit dances invoked elemental and animal energies. People were healed in the firelight, the myth alive in song, language, breath, and movement. All parts of the pulsing amalgam containing essential wisdom. The wisdom of the earth, the wisdom of God. There are spiritual laws. Laws not written but spoken through time and tradition. Ancient agreements made between animal spirits and the people who they nourish. How to cut the salmon's flesh, what to do with its heart, so that it keeps coming back year after year. These sorts of things are difficult for us to understand, but that doesn't mean they aren't still the law. A force of transformation would eventually come. A force propelled by very different but very confident notions. Lewis and Clark were thrashed by wind and rain when they finally reached the Pacific coast, November of 1805. The entire Corps of Discovery took turns being bedridden, sick, in wet clothes, which never dried the 3 months they wintered here. Our pale friends surely would have perished without the help of local tribes. It was the High Wizard, Thomas Jefferson, who sent them forth in a westward burst of that potent American spell. It didn't take long. The transformation was underway. Wilderness turned to towns, forests to lumber, fish to tins, and animals to furs and skins. There's scarcely anything that wasn't completely transformed. Let's consider the beaver, a creature in perfect harmony with its environment, a genius, architect and engineer, both fish and mammal, with transparent eyelids like swimming goggles, and teeth to saw down trees with precision, complex underwater homes, and radiant, thick, waterproof fur. This here is not a beaver, but a related aquatic rodent, invasive to the northwest, called a nutria. You see, the beaver was nearly eliminated in the fur trade of the 1800s. And over 200 years later, the population is still diminished. For so many quiet centuries, beavers ruled the crystalline rivers, happily unaware that their glossy fur was in hot demand to be pressed and morphed into very specific hats for men. The beaver top hat would come to symbolize wealth, and status and good taste for Yankee Doodle dandy types. John Jacob Astor, founder of the Pacific Fur Company and for whom Astoria, Oregon is named, he knew that the nobility and luster of nature made people feel noble and lustrous themselves. Astor's Oregon fur trade monopoly made him the richest man in America. But he invested his fortune in New York City real estate. Astor came to own so much property, he was known as New York's landlord during his life. Astoria, Queens, the Astor Library, Astor Opera House, and Astor Place were all named for him. Every 10 minutes, a silver train flashes through Astor Place Station in Manhattan's East Village. As millions of New Yorkers pass through this portal, how many will notice? The many beavers adorning the tiled walls. Beavers. A modest acknowledgement of them who were brought to near extinction, whose natural animal shimmer was alchemically exchanged for the shimmer of glass, steel, and bank coins at the new throne of capitalism. While the traps closed on the necks of beavers and Oregon rivers ran red, Astor's pockets filled, and a new level of so-called material wealth was born, and a new depth of yearning was pressed into the soul of the American. I grinded my bones just to be in that Empire City, to live in the vibration and chaos, the cauldron. But ultimately, I returned to the beaver state. I can't stop thinking about karmic ripples. Astor and his beaver fortune. His great-grandson, John Jacob IV, who would end up the wealthiest passenger to drown in the sinking of the Titanic. Could it have been a beaver curse? A spiritual debt settled? Imagine the beaver furs and top hats floating with dead bodies in the icy Atlantic. You never quite know how things will shake out, how they will resound and echo in time. What will take on psychotropic Hollywood glamour, gain or lose power, get haunted, or just covered in dust.
Like sometimes you'll just see an image that looks just like a shot of the pie, Like I'm sure you've all seen you're standing there and you'll see something out of your peripheral vision. Those things are really there. They are really, honestly, truly there. But they don't like you to directly see them. So when you look to see them, they disappear because they don't want to be seen. And normally I have a habit of if I see them or I encounter them, I'll interact with them, and they don't like it. And this, especially the first time, and then the next time it's this girl. It's I don't know. Sometimes some of it's okay, but most of them don't like it.
Certain places are teeming with ghosts. Marsh's is a hothouse of disoriented and groggy energies. Like Bonnie, I've always had a weird feeling here. A teenage me stands right here before the mystery urns and many unblinking eyes, feeling that thick electric residue. There is something in particular here I've been communing with throughout my life. An object so charged, it's been removed from public viewing. In the back room he sits, eternally silent and still, like a boy in a fairy tale, under a horrible spell. His eyes, the perfect height to stare back at you if you're a child. He was always my favorite thing here as a kid. The one I felt hypnotized by, absorbing something that he communicates. In the year 2020, the harmonica boy was removed from the floor of the museum. The object had become intensely re-spiritualized and attracted much negative attention.
And it was during, when the guy, I'm not sure who it was, because I don't ever watch TV, the last guy who got killed by the police officers. And we had a lot of people calling and emailing and saying, how they weren't going to come back. And so it wasn't worth, someone throwing rocks through a window. Just, we'll take it out.
I shouldn't have to hide myself to make other people feel happy. And that's what upset me the most, that we had to hide it away. And it wasn't black people that was upset. Every black person was okay with it that came to this museum. It was like, this was what happened. They explained it and moved on. It was a lot of white people that essentially got angry at the museum saying that it was racist. I'm like, duh, yeah, that's the purpose. That's the absolute purpose. And that's why it should stay. Why are we hiding it from the children? You should be upset. Explain why you're upset and make sure they don't do it. Make them grow. That is all. So I was a very upset person because we had to take all of it away because I wouldn't want the museum to get damaged, and I understood. I was just very angry that morning.
We hide certain artifacts away. Seek to disassociate from them. And the human tremor of their creation. It's somehow still too soon for us. Our souls somehow too permeable to old evils. Too weak to confront the shadow. The only answer to shadow is light. The light of the good old antimicrobial sun. They came by the boatload across the globe, penniless, young, and crazy with the fever. They did it with their own little swinging arms, their innocent arms, now the arms of the beast, blades flashing, pillars falling, steam rising, oxen choking in the mud. They pose with the stumps like proud hunters on the African savanna. Boys wrangled to open the horizon, to strip the ancient forest of its giants and myth-making darkness. To make way for the bright new world. My own great-great-grandfather was one of these young men. He came from Finland. His name was Eustace. And in this photo, I sense he is aware of eyes from the future looking at him. Was there a master plan? Was there a master? Was there a plan? Was it all meant to turn out this way? All of this, all of our activity occurs upon the surface of a live planet. A fault line where one tectonic plate interlocks another 25 miles underfoot. This is the Cascadian subduction zone, a dramatic region of volcanic mountains and coastline in slow, liquid geological process. One day, a sudden release will come of the energy locked between the converging plates, setting off a massive earthquake, the likes of which occurred over 300 years ago in the year 1700. Natives of the northern coast of Washington state tell of this great quake with myth stories of the fighting thunderbird and whale. That quake devastated and reshaped the region, burying and washing away villages, reduced to a layer of sediment in the planetary birthday cake. Millions of people live in the subduction zone today. Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, BC. All these cities were laid in the red zone before our science had caught up to indigenous wisdom and record keeping. Unreinforced masonry buildings and bridges predate the concept of plate tectonics. It might be better not to dwell on all that. Instead, think of the persistent thread of spirit that carries through time. The perennial heartbeat, the chain. Watch. Flashes of the ancient flickering through. Unexpected visitors and messages. A real, live 21st century beaver swims right up. Glossy, shimmering. Elegantly turning in the water. As its ancestors did.